On a quiet evening, Tom stormed into the house, waving his belt like a weapon. "Who do you think you are?" he roared, eyes burning with hatred. Mary sat still. She didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She just looked at him, calm, unafraid, and completely unfazed. Her heart had long been weathered by these storms. But tonight would be different. She didn't fight back with violence. But she knew one thing. We can all change. And I will change. This day would come, the day she would no longer be that timid, controlled woman. Mary had been preparing for this moment for a long time. And her husband had no idea that the real monster wasn't her. Mary was a 48-year-old woman living in a small house on the outskirts of Phoenix, Arizona. Gentle, warm, always smiling when she stepped outside, she was the picture of sacrifice and devotion. She'd married Tom when she was very young, a handsome man, but one who carried deep shadows in his soul. Mary was a kind mother to 2 grown children, a son and a daughter, both away at college. From the outside, her life looked perfect. But only Mary knew the truth behind that smile. Her husband, Tom, was a man with a vicious temper, unforgiving even of the smallest mistakes. He didn't just try to control Mary, he used violence to enforce it. Years of beatings. Years of verbal abuse. Mary had lived in constant fear for so long. But she wasn't weak. Far from it. Mary was sharp, intelligent, and resilient. She kept hoping things would change, that Tom would see the damage, remember the love, and choose differently. But the truth was, he didn't change. He only got worse. Every morning, Mary would wake up and dream of a different life, a life where she was free. But she also knew she couldn't just leave, not without a plan. She didn't want to lose her family. But she couldn't keep living under threats and humiliation either. So she made a choice. She would change, not by running away, but by rebuilding herself from the inside out. Then one cold winter afternoon, Mary discovered something no one could have expected. Tom had left his phone on the table while he was in the shower. A message lit up the screen from a woman Mary had never heard of. "I miss you, Tom. Let's meet tonight. Don't forget what you promised me." The words were sweet, but to Mary, they burned like fire. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She didn't barge into the bathroom to confront him. She just stood there, eyes fixed on the screen, letting every word slice through her. For years, she'd wondered if Tom truly loved her. Now, the answer was clear. Not only did he not love her, he had betrayed her. Rage bubbled inside her, but instead of acting on it, Mary felt a strange calm settle over her. She whispered to herself, "All I need now is patience. Patience is the key. One day, he'll pay." This wasn't despair. It wasn't pain. It was cold, focused determination. She knew that confronting him right away would only make things worse. And Tom had always relied on force to control her. But this time, Mary wouldn't play by his rules. She would use intelligence, patience, and the power of transformation. She would let him destroy himself without even realizing that she was the one holding the strings. There would be no more chances, no more forgiveness, no more hope. Mary would change completely. Her looks, her life, her soul, so much so that Tom wouldn't even recognize her. She would become a woman he could never control again. After discovering Tom's betrayal, Mary didn't do what most people would expect. She didn't yell. She didn't pack her bags. She didn't create a dramatic scene or blow up in anger. Instead, she chose silence. And in that silence, she began crafting a grand plan no one could see coming. For months, Mary reminded herself not to rush. She needed time to prepare, to learn, to plan each step with strategy. No one could hurt her anymore because she had learned to control her emotions. She started researching her legal rights, divorce, custody, joint assets, everything she needed to build a future. She was no longer dependent on Tom. And she knew she wouldn't live in fear forever. Mary began studying the law, attending women's rights workshops, and making new friends, survivors, just like her. She found a lawyer, someone she trusted, who could guide her through the legal maze and help her build a strong divorce case. She told no one, especially not Tom. Everything was done in secret, quiet, calculated, and above all, discreet. She also began building a career of her own. Mary took courses in marketing. She picked up freelance gigs. Slowly, she began to build a client base and form a professional network. She was no longer just a devoted wife. She was becoming an independent, powerful woman. In the evenings, when Tom was drunk and paid her no mind, Mary sat quietly at her computer, learning about investments, financial management, and new career paths. It wasn't fear that kept her quiet, it was wisdom. Mary knew that every step had to be perfectly prepared. Once she had financial freedom, legal knowledge, and a support system in place, she would leave. She would walk away without looking back. She would make Tom see that she didn't need him, that he had lost the one and only chance to change. She would no longer be the weak woman he had once taken for granted. Mary began her transformation, not just emotionally, but physically. She knew that real change had to be visible. And she wanted Tom and the world to see her with new eyes. She changed the way she dressed. Gone were the simple, outdated clothes. In their place, elegant, modern outfits that showed off her strength and confidence. Fitted dresses, nothing flashy, just bold enough to turn heads. Crisp blouses. Tailored slacks. A new style that was both graceful and powerful. She let go of the plain hairstyles and started going for sleek, sophisticated looks. She began working out, too, yoga, Pilates, anything to reconnect with her body and rebuild the confidence that Tom had spent years breaking down. She could feel herself getting stronger, more flexible. Not just in her body, but in her spirit. Bit by bit, Mary was coming back to life. And this time, she wasn't coming back for anyone but herself. One of the biggest changes in Mary was the way she communicated. She used to speak softly, sometimes timidly. But now her voice carried more confidence, her eyes sparkled with clarity, and every word felt carefully chosen. When Tom walked into a room, she no longer looked down. She stood tall, her gaze steady, not fearful, but like a light illuminating everything around her. Her voice no longer trembled. It was firm, powerful. She was no longer the timid, resigned woman she once was, but a strong, independent force. For Mary, these changes weren't just on the outside. They signified a deep internal shift. She didn't just want Tom to see her differently. She wanted to feel strong from within. The days of living in the shadows of abuse were over. She felt a growing strength inside her, and she knew that before long, all the effort she had put in would help her break free from Tom's shadow and live the life she truly deserved. Mary took another bold step. She began shaping a completely new identity. No longer the patient, compliant wife, she was becoming a self-sufficient, independent woman full of vitality. She no longer confined herself within the walls of her house. She ventured out, built new relationships, and started her own career path. She decided to create a social media account, at first just to share her thoughts and personal reflections. But she quickly realized it was an opportunity to rebuild her image in the eyes of the world. She began writing blog posts about female empowerment, about overcoming domestic abuse, about personal freedom. Her writing reflected not just her internal struggle, but became a source of comfort and encouragement for other women in similar situations. By sharing raw, honest stories, Mary began gaining attention online. Words of praise, supportive messages from other women who had experienced or were experiencing abuse made her feel less alone. She connected with organizations that support abused women, attended workshops, and volunteered to help others in need. Meanwhile, Tom had no idea that while he remained trapped in his toxic patterns and obsessive control, Mary was building a powerful community around her. She was forming new connections with people who shared her values, her vision. These new friends didn't just offer guidance, they inspired her. Mary slowly became an influential figure in the women's support community. She was no longer just a survivor of domestic violence. She was a leader, someone guiding others toward freedom and independence. Gradually, invitations started coming in, speaking engagements, panels on women's rights and domestic violence awareness. She became a symbol of resilience, a woman who dared to stand up and change her life, who refused to let anyone control her again. Compliments from men, respectful messages, genuine interest from thoughtful individuals made her realize something profound. She was worthy of love and respect, not because she was a self-sacrificing wife, but because she was an independent, powerful, and dignified woman. She wasn't just rebuilding her life, she was creating a whole new world, one where women like her could come together, share, learn, and grow stronger every day. Mary didn't need Tom anymore, and she knew that with each decision she made, she was moving further away from a violent marriage and closer to the free woman she had always dreamed of being. Once she had built up enough confidence and a strong support network, Mary realized that in order to truly escape Tom's control and live independently, she had to gain financial independence. She couldn't keep depending on the same man who had emotionally and financially abused her. This wasn't just about money, it was about power and freedom, things she had been denied for far too long. She started learning about investing, personal finance, and how to take control of her financial future. She enrolled in financial management and investment courses, researched income-generating assets, from stocks to real estate. She began setting aside a portion of her income to invest in small projects, gradually building a solid financial foundation. She was no longer a wife waiting for handouts. She was a woman making her own decisions. One of her most important steps was opening a bank account in her name, no longer shared with Tom. Mary became meticulous with every expense, cutting out unnecessary spending and building up savings for her future. She studied financial tools like stocks, bonds, and smart borrowing strategies to grow her wealth. At the same time, she hired a lawyer to prepare for divorce. She didn't want to simply leave Tom, she wanted to do it strategically, ensuring she kept her financial rights and custody of her children. Mary was no longer the voiceless woman of the past. She had found a way to reclaim her life on her own terms. She began working harder, growing her career, and getting involved in community projects focused on women's rights. Thanks to her new network, she discovered professional opportunities she had never imagined. She took initiative in every job, from side gigs to major projects she led herself. Mary knew that without financial independence, she would never be truly free of Tom. All the while, Tom remained unaware that everything was changing. He didn't realize Mary was no longer the weak woman he thought he could control. She had reclaimed her power not through arguments or anger, but by rebuilding her life brick by brick, finances, career, personal agency. Mary was no longer a controlled wife. She was a woman with a voice, a vision, and the freedom to shape her future. As she took these first steps to rebuild her life, gain financial control, and assert her independence, Mary didn't rush to flaunt her transformation in front of Tom. But the subtle shifts, the quiet, deliberate signals, started to unsettle him. One day, she walked into the room in a sleek, elegant outfit. Crisp white blouse, perfectly tailored black slacks. Gone was the disheveled housewife. She no longer rushed to do the dishes or busy herself with chores. When facing Tom, she kept her tone polite but cool, maintaining a calm distance. Every time he asked her to do something, she'd simply reply, gently but sharply, "You can do it yourself, Tom." One evening, as Tom sat in the living room, Mary received a message from a new friend she'd met through social media. It wasn't anything major, just a congratulatory note about a project she had completed. But when she opened her phone, Tom's suspicious eyes followed her. She calmly read the message, made no effort to hide it, but she made sure he noticed. Those messages seemed harmless enough, but in Tom's heart, the change in Mary's behavior stirred a growing sense of unease. One day, Mary attended a community event. She shared photos from the gathering, posing with a group of people, including several men. She even posted a picture with a man she had just met, not to provoke Tom, but simply to highlight a new professional connection. Still, seeing her with other men made Tom feel his grip slipping. Each time he saw these images, an anxiety crept in, even though Mary hadn't said or done anything confrontational. Tom couldn't understand how Mary had changed so quickly. She was no longer the woman he could easily manipulate. Her cold stares, sharp words, and the familiar gestures he once commanded now made him feel like a stranger, excluded from the life he once dominated. Mary's composure wasn't just surface level, it radiated from within. And that scared him. He began to wonder, am I losing her? There were no shouting matches, no accusations. Mary didn't need them. Her silence, her quiet strength, and her firm boundaries sent a message louder than words. Tom no longer held the reins of her life. These subtle shifts hit him like emotional slaps, each one landing with unexpected force. For the first time in years, he was truly unsettled. Mary had prepared for this moment for a long time. And now she was ready to confront Tom, not with rage, but with calm clarity. She didn't need to yell or accuse him of anything. All it would take was one composed decision and a few wise words to let him know everything had changed forever. One evening at dinner, just like so many nights before, Tom tried to ease into conversation with his usual soft tone. Are you tired? What did you do today? He asked as if nothing had changed. But this time, Mary didn't bow her head or smile politely. She looked him in the eye. No longer the submissive wife, she wore a faint smile, but it wasn't warm. I'm not tired, Tom. I'm just finally clear about what I want. Her voice was calm and steady. Her gaze held no weakness, only cool, unshakable confidence. And what I want is freedom. I don't need to be here anymore. Tom stared at her, stunned. He never imagined she'd say those words. He had assumed he still had control, still had her under his thumb. But Mary wasn't that woman anymore. She had changed, and the realization terrified him. He sat in silence, unsure of how to respond. Mary didn't need to say anything more. She stood up and walked toward the door. With a sharp, composed glance and a decision she wouldn't reverse, she made everything clear. Just before stepping out, she said quietly, I don't need you anymore, Tom. We have nothing left. I already have everything I need. And I'm never coming back. Tom remained seated, struggling to accept what had just happened. He thought he could still play the same game, still control her. But deep down, he knew he'd already lost her long ago. No screaming, no threats. Just one sentence, and it all crumbled. Mary ended the marriage not with a fight, but with unwavering resolve. She was no longer the meek, self-sacrificing wife. She had become a strong, self-possessed woman. She didn't need to justify herself to a man who no longer deserved her. All she needed to do was walk away, leaving Tom in his confusion and defeat. The emotional blows she delivered didn't need to be loud. Her silence, confidence, and determination were enough. After choosing to walk away from her abusive marriage, Mary didn't just change her own life. She declared, with quiet pride, that she had won. Not just in her personal life, but in the psychological war Tom had once waged against her. She didn't need to proclaim anything grand. Her life and choices spoke louder than any words could. One day, Mary stood on a stage at a women's rights event, sharing her story. She had prepared meticulously, not just her speech, but her appearance. A simple yet elegant dress highlighted her strength and grace. She wasn't there for attention, but the way she carried herself, her glowing eyes, her radiant smile, was a powerful testament to the freedom she had reclaimed. At the event, She reunited with the new friends she had made while rebuilding her life. She laughed and spoke with both men and women, showing no sign of weakness or fear. People saw her not just as a woman who had survived hardship, but as a role model for strength, independence, and rebirth. Meanwhile, Tom sat at home, scrolling through Mary's social media posts. He couldn't understand how she had changed so drastically. He was stunned to see her confidently attending high-profile events, mingling with other men. Her photos with new friends, her proud captions about personal achievements, it all made Tom feel like a failure. He sat in his empty house, haunted by memories of the years he thought he had her under control, believing she would always be the timid, selfless wife. But now, he realized that his own actions had pushed her away. Mary had not only escaped his grasp, she had stepped into the world with pride. She wasn't out seeking validation. Her freedom was her triumph. She didn't need to prove her success. Those around her, including those who once witnessed her pain, could see it clearly. She had won not through revenge, but through maturity, independence, and fierce determination after years of silent endurance. One evening, Mary appeared at a major event, accompanied by a man who wasn't her ex-husband. They weren't a couple, but his presence, even as a friend, spoke volumes. Mary now had full control over her life. She didn't need Tom. Tom, watching from a distance, felt bitterness rise inside him. He knew no matter what he did, there was nothing he could do to change the outcome. The admiration and respect Mary received from others only made him feel smaller. He was still clinging to the past, hoping to reclaim something long gone. But Mary was no longer the woman he once knew. She was free, she was happy, and she had truly moved on. While those around her praised Mary for how far she had come, Tom could only quietly drown in the ruins of his own failure. With her proud appearance at the event, Mary sent a clear message. She had triumphed not just by leaving behind a painful past, but by living freely and firmly on her own path. After a series of shocks brought on by Mary, Tom began to truly feel the shift in his life. He couldn't avoid the waves of regret and sorrow, emotions he had never allowed himself to feel before. Everything seemed to be collapsing around him. Since Mary walked out of his life, Tom had felt lost and disoriented. He realized he had lost the only woman who ever loved and cared for him. Though the signs had been there for a while, he never imagined Mary would actually follow through with such a resolute decision. Losing Mary meant losing everything he had once taken for granted: his home, his sense of stability, and a devoted wife. In the months that followed, Tom became exhausted and broken. He couldn't concentrate at work, couldn't face his friends or colleagues. They began to notice the change in him. He was irritable, unusually quiet at times, and no longer the confident man he used to be. He started to look back on his past and finally saw his own shortcomings. The feeling of loss and failure surged within him. He remembered all the times he had hurt Mary, belittled her, assumed she would always stay no matter what he did. But now that she was gone, the painful truth hit him hard. Late one night, in the silence of his empty home, Tom sat alone flipping through old family photos. A heavy feeling welled up in his chest. He decided to write Mary a letter, not to ask for forgiveness or beg her to come back, but to express his deep remorse. In the letter, he wrote, "Mary, you were right. I was arrogant and blind to everything you endured. I didn't deserve the love you gave me. I only hope that someday you might forgive me, even though I know I can't change the past. I regret letting you go, for not recognizing the value you brought into my life. All I want now is for you to be happy." Tom sealed the letter and stared out the window, his heart heavy. The emptiness and despair were inescapable. He realized that no matter how many letters he wrote or how deeply he regretted everything, it was too late. Mary was no longer there, no longer waiting for him. The void inside him only grew, and he came to understand he had lost the most precious thing in his life. A week later, Mary received the letter. She read each word with a strange calmness. There was no anger, no sense of satisfaction, only peace and the deep awareness that she had made the right decision. She was no longer the weak woman Tom once thought would always stay by his side no matter what. She had reclaimed herself and overcome everything he had put her through. Mary didn't respond right away. She took a few days to think, not because she was confused or conflicted, but because she wanted to be clear on what she wanted from their final meeting. Tom had mistaken his remorse for something that could change everything, but Mary now knew she didn't need to go back. She didn't need to live in the shadows of those painful years anymore. Eventually, Mary agreed to meet Tom. She invited him to a quiet coffee shop, a place where no one would disturb them. When Tom walked in and saw Mary sitting there, she was still the woman he once loved, but there was something profoundly different about her. She was no longer weak. She no longer needed him to feel safe. Mary didn't let Tom speak right away. She smiled gently, her eyes full of quiet resolve. She looked straight at him, not with anger or blame, but with a calmness he had never seen before. "Tom, I read your letter." Tom lowered his head, ashamed and full of guilt. He couldn't look her in the eye, afraid that if he did, he wouldn't be able to bear her disappointment. Mary continued, her voice gentle but firm. "You hurt me deeply, and I'll never forget what you did. But I don't hate you. I truly don't. I just feel sorry for you, for losing someone like me, and for not realizing sooner that love can't be built on control and suppression." Tom looked up, his eyes filled with confusion, as if he couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You don't need to seek forgiveness from me," Mary said, "because I've already forgiven myself. And I've found the peace you never could give me. This forgiveness, it's not for you. It's for me. So I can live my life free of that burden." Tom had no words. He sat there, feeling as if his heart had been torn apart. Mary's words weren't just the end of their marriage. They were a declaration of her strength and growth. Mary didn't go back to Tom, not for any reason other than she had already moved on. Her forgiveness wasn't an act of grace toward him. It was her own turning point, her way of freeing herself from the past. She didn't allow Tom another chance to hurt her. As their meeting ended, Mary stood up and looked at Tom one last time, not with anger, just calm. "This is where we end, Tom. I wish you luck with your life." She walked out of the coffee shop without looking back, leaving Tom behind in a haze of regret. After meeting with Tom, Mary continued walking her chosen path. Each day, she felt a deeper sense of freedom and a refreshing peace in her life. She was no longer haunted by past mistakes, no longer living in the shadow of the man who once abused her. Now, Mary was the master of her own life, no one else. She had rebuilt from the ground up, not just financially, but emotionally. Her current career had flourished. Mary was a successful, independent, and self-assured woman. She had created her own future and became a source of inspiration to thousands of other women, especially those who had faced domestic abuse. She helped them reclaim their strength and freedom, just as she had. One afternoon, Mary attended a community event where she was honored for her contributions to supporting abused women. At the event, she didn't appear alone. She arrived with a new companion, a kind, refined man. People around her admired her strength, confidence, and beauty. No one remembered Tom. No one even mentioned the dark past she had overcome. To them, she was simply the Mary of today, a woman full of power and joy. Meanwhile, Tom, the man who once was Mary's husband, now sat alone in his empty house. His life was no longer what it used to be. Old relationships had faded. His career was in steep decline. He thought back on everything he'd lost, the emptiness in his heart more palpable than ever. But there was no Mary there to pull him out, no one beside him to call out his mistakes. Everything he had once considered stable had collapsed, and he had no idea how to pick himself up again. The final image, Mary stepping out of the event, a fresh bouquet of flowers clutched in her hand, the golden light of the setting sun glinting off her hair, an image of freedom, radiant and full of life. She walked through the crowd with no rush, no fear, only joy and confidence. She had nothing left to prove, and she certainly didn't need Tom's forgiveness or anyone else's from the past. Mary had come back to life, not just surviving, but truly living, with meaning and freedom. She was a living testament to healing and the strength of a woman. She no longer needed a man's love to feel worthy, and in that moment, she knew she had achieved the greatest thing of all, complete freedom. In the bustle of the crowd, the sunlight danced across Mary's smile as she walked on, down her own path, unstoppable. As Mary's story came to a close, one seemingly small detail took on a deeper, more poignant meaning: the lemon bar Tom had once baked for her. At first, that lemon bar had been a sign of care, a small gesture that Tom had thought would make Mary feel loved, looked after. In the early days of their marriage, it was one of the few ways he ever showed affection. But as Mary's life grew darker and more suffocating, that same lemon bar became a symbol of deception, of pretense, and of words that meant nothing. It no longer represented love. It represented control and manipulation. Now, having left Tom and rebuilt her life from the ground up, the lemon bar was no longer a sweet treat. It had become a symbol of awakening. When Mary looked back on it, she no longer felt warmth or affection. What she saw was rejection, her rejection of the years she spent living in the shadows, trapped by illusions of love. With the freedom and strength she had reclaimed, that lemon bar was now a sign of liberation. It wasn't a gift from a husband anymore. It was the mark of a past she had left behind. Mary had learned that love isn't about unconditional sacrifice or silent suffering. It's about the ability to rise up and create a life on your own terms, free from dependence on anyone else. By the end of the story, the lemon bar no longer recalled painful memories. It was simply a symbol of freedom, of transformation, of a brand new beginning. And when others reflect on that small detail, they'll realize it wasn't just a dessert. It was the evidence of Mary's journey, from suffering and silence to strength and self-possession. Looking back on her journey, Mary couldn't help but feel proud of the strength and growth she had cultivated. From a woman who had been abused, silenced, and convinced she wasn't worthy, she had become someone independent, free, and powerful. She hadn't just survived, she had thrived. She wondered, briefly, whether Tom had ever realized how much she had changed. Whether he regretted what he had done. But then she understood, those answers didn't matter anymore. She wasn't living her life waiting for someone else's remorse. She didn't need anyone's validation. She had created a life entirely her own, a life she fully controlled. Mary smiled gently, letting the past dissolve. She knew she was no longer the fearful, invisible girl she used to be. She had risen from the rubble, rebuilt herself from the ruins. And now she no longer needed to prove anything to anyone, not even to herself. She had done what she once thought impossible. No more pain. No more regret. All I want now is peace. She whispered to herself, her eyes gazing forward toward the bright future ahead. The forgiveness she had given herself wasn't an ending, it was a beginning. She no longer carried the weight of the past, no longer lived under the shadow of old wounds. Mary knew that with every passing day, she was becoming the best version of herself. Thank you for making me stronger, Tom. But I'm not that woman anymore. And in that realization, Mary understood something deeply important. No one could ever take away her freedom or her happiness again. She had taken her power back from the man who once tried to control her. And now she was the true author of her own life.